What if I told you Prince Harry was found lifeless in his Montecito estate, and Meghan Markle allegedly refused to call for help until it was almost too late? It began like any other quiet day in Montecito. Morning fog hovered just above the hills, birds chirped against the stillness of California's elite enclave, and inside the lushly guarded gates of the Sussex estate, all appeared serene. But within minutes, that illusion was shattered. A 911 call, placed under hushed panic, jolted emergency responders into action. Paramedics arrived to find Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, once a royal symbol of hope, collapsed, unresponsive, and alone. There were no aides beside him, no security bustling to assist. Just silence, broken only by shallow breaths and the cold hum of life slipping away. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what stunned responders wasn't just the condition Harry was found in. It was what they were told upon arrival. That Meghan Markle, his wife, partner, and gatekeeper, had allegedly delayed calling for help. According to sources close to the incident, she believed Harry was just overwhelmed and needed space. Reports claim she refused immediate assistance, choosing instead to isolate him in a locked room for nearly an hour. When emergency services were finally contacted, precious time had already been lost. The call, when it finally came in, was clinical and brief. No crying, no desperation, just a voice requesting assistance for a man unconscious, citing stress-related fatigue. But what paramedics found went far beyond exhaustion. Harry was pale, his pulse faint. One EMT reportedly described his condition as hours from irreversible. The man once known for his military strength and rebellious resilience was now frail, visibly deteriorated, and emotionally vacant. News traveled fast. Inside a royal recording studio in Windsor, King Charles III was filming a pre-recorded message intended for a charitable foundation. As word reached him through his aide's earpiece, quietly, mid-recording, that his youngest son had collapsed and might not make it, the monarch froze. According to royal sources, cameras continued to roll for a moment as Charles's face twisted in shock, his voice caught in his throat. And then, before the crew could cut, he whispered a single sentence that stunned even those closest to him. "She's done this. She's killed him." It wasn't just grief. It was rage. Rage that had been boiling beneath the surface for months, possibly years. Rage over headlines, interviews, betrayals, book deals, and alienation. Rage that culminated, at that very moment, in an order. Get her. I want her held. Arrest her. A sovereign ordering the arrest of his own daughter-in-law? In modern Britain, such a command defies both law and precedent. But this wasn't a legal decree. It was a father's fury unleashed. A declaration that, royal or not, Meghan Markle had crossed an irreversible line. The palace immediately went into lockdown. Communication officers scrambled to contain the leak. But it was too late. Within hours, rumors spiraled across social media, royal correspondence, and even mainstream news outlets. Was Meghan being investigated? Had King Charles really issued such an order? Was Harry alive? As conflicting reports flooded the press, only one thing remained undisputed. Prince Harry had been found in critical condition under highly suspicious circumstances. And Meghan Markle, once America's fairy tale princess turned royal duchess, now stood at the center of one of the most explosive scandals in modern royal history. This is not just another tabloid drama. This is a breaking story layered in secrecy, power, and personal destruction. And it begins long before Harry's unconscious body was found on the floor. It begins with a slow unraveling. A deterioration of mind, body, and spirit that many insiders now believe was not only ignored but systematically covered up. Over the course of this investigation, you'll discover the full extent of Harry's declining health, the signs that were allegedly suppressed, the tension inside the Montecito mansion, and the royal family's private conversations leading up to that fateful day. You'll hear quotes from insiders, staff, medical experts, and former royal aides who now feel compelled to speak out. Was this the result of medical negligence, emotional abuse, or something more orchestrated? Was Meghan's alleged inaction that day an isolated incident, or part of a larger pattern that had gone unnoticed for too long? Could a member of the royal family truly stand accused of letting her husband suffer in silence, to the point of collapse? These are the questions no one in Buckingham Palace wants to answer. And yet they are the very questions the public now demands answers to. As we peel back the layers of this growing scandal, one thing becomes disturbingly clear. This is not just about health. It's not even just about the royals. This is a story about control, isolation, the breakdown of a once hopeful man crushed under the weight of silence and secrecy, and a monarchy teetering on the edge of a modern reckoning. This investigation will reveal the reported phone call between Meghan and palace advisors where she allegedly dismissed medical intervention. We'll expose the chilling timeline of Harry's symptoms leading up to his collapse, information allegedly kept hidden from both the royal family and the public. And we'll explore the explosive reaction from King Charles, whose grief transformed into rage in real time as his worst fears were confirmed live on camera. And just when you think the dust has settled, we'll take you into the internal war that erupted inside the palace walls. Family members turning on one another. Lawyers advising crisis teams. Royal titles now at risk of being stripped. And whispers from sources close to the king that he's preparing to make a constitutional decision the world has never seen. This video isn't speculation. It's a deep dive into the crisis that is rocking the House of Windsor from the inside out. A story that started with love and revolution and may end with handcuffs and a legacy in ruins. Stay with us, because what comes next will change the way you view the royals forever. The Sussex fairy tale has shattered. The question now is, can anyone survive the aftermath? The day Harry collapsed was not the first time his health had raised concern, but it was the first time it had escalated so quickly, so dangerously, and under such damning circumstances. This section, the first chapter of the full story, peels back what really happened in the final hours before Prince Harry was found motionless in his Montecito home. We explore the timeline of events, the chilling silence that surrounded the estate, and the moment everything spiraled into crisis. It was around 6:30 a.m. local time when the first signs of distress reportedly began. Staff on the property noted that Harry had not emerged for his usual early walk. According to insiders, it was routine for the Duke to step outside alone at dawn, a practice that had helped him manage his mental state for years. But on this day, his quarters remained locked from the inside. No word, no sound, no signs of movement. One housekeeper, familiar with his schedule, knocked gently on the door. There was no answer. The silence reportedly stretched on for nearly 40 minutes. At approximately 7:10 a.m., Meghan Markle was seen exiting a separate wing of the house. A staff member, unaware of the looming emergency, reportedly informed her that Harry had not been seen all morning. The alleged response was cold. She waved off the concern, saying he had a rough night and needed to sleep it off. But whispers from inside the property say that was not the full story. Multiple sources claim Meghan had been aware of Harry's fragile mental and physical condition for several days prior. He had reportedly experienced severe headaches, disorientation, and anxiety attacks, symptoms he allegedly described as feeling like his brain was on fire. These weren't subtle warnings. And yet, it appears no medical help was called, no royal physician contacted, and no family alerted. By 7:45 a.m., a male staff member reportedly defied protocol and entered Harry's room with a spare key. What he found, according to accounts, was a man lying crumpled on the floor, still in sleepwear, his breathing shallow and skin clammy. A nearby glass of untouched water sat on the nightstand. His phone lay beneath the bed, apparently unused. The room was reportedly dim and quiet, but a small light blinked red on the wall. An alert triggered by a silent panic button, one Harry may have pressed hours before collapsing. The house staff member immediately rushed to alert Meghan, who was in another part of the house speaking on the phone. According to accounts, she calmly finished her call before acknowledging the message. When she entered Harry's room, sources say she appeared alarmed, but not panicked. When staff suggested calling 911, she allegedly replied, "Not yet. Let's give him space. He doesn't like attention when he's like this." This hesitation, this moment of indecision, has now become the central controversy surrounding the entire incident. It wasn't until nearly 8:20 a.m. that an emergency call was finally placed. By then, almost 90 minutes had passed since Harry had last been seen. When paramedics arrived, they found a scene that, in their own words, should have been addressed at least an hour earlier. One responder claimed Harry's blood pressure had plummeted, his oxygen levels unstable. He was immediately placed on assisted breathing and rushed to a private medical facility under heavy security. Medical experts who later reviewed the call logs and emergency notes described the situation as a near-miss fatality. They stopped short of calling it a full cardiac event but confirmed that his vital signs showed signs of acute physiological stress, bordering on collapse from neurological exhaustion and respiratory dysfunction. In simpler terms, Harry had hit a wall. His mind and body gave out. Why wasn't help called sooner? That question still hangs in the air. Some defenders of Meghan have suggested that she may not have realized the severity of Harry's condition. That she, perhaps like many spouses, assumed it was a momentary panic episode, a temporary burnout. But others, especially those within palace circles, view her decision through a much darker lens. One insider put it bluntly: if you see someone slurring their speech, unable to walk, and you still don't call for help, what are you doing? What are you hiding? The public response was swift and visceral. Once the news broke that Harry had been rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and that Meghan had allegedly delayed the emergency call, social media erupted. Thousands took to Twitter and Instagram, demanding answers. Hashtags like #JusticeForHarry, #WhyDidSheWait, and #MeghanArrest trended for hours. Commentators on both sides debated fiercely. Was this a tragic misunderstanding, or something more sinister? But perhaps the most significant reaction came not from the public, but from within the monarchy itself. The royal family was informed just moments after Harry was admitted to the emergency ward. Prince William reportedly received the message during a private breakfast with his eldest son. He allegedly stood up without a word, left the room, and did not return for over an hour. Meanwhile, Princess, and long seen as one of the most emotionally restrained members of the family, was said to have burst into tears during a meeting with her charity staff. But it was King Charles whose response stunned everyone. He had been taping a speech for a veterans foundation when a senior aide whispered the news into his earpiece. His face reportedly turned pale. He asked for a pause. Then, in a moment caught off camera but confirmed by several staff members, he stood, turned to his chief of staff, and said words that would ripple through the monarchy like a lightning strike. "She's responsible. I want her held. Call the lawyers." It wasn't an official arrest warrant, but it was an order that would set off a flurry of secret calls between the palace and the UK's legal advisors, sparking debates about whether Meghan Markle, a US citizen, could face any form of criminal or civil inquiry. As of now, no charges have been filed. But according to sources close to the royal household, an internal investigation is already underway, and it's being led by the king himself. At the core of this unraveling story lies one disturbing reality. Prince Harry nearly died, and the events surrounding that moment, especially the delay in emergency care, have thrown open a door the palace hoped would stay closed. A door leading to months, maybe years, of buried tensions, medical neglect, and emotional isolation. And that's just the beginning. The moments after Harry was loaded into the ambulance were described by witnesses as frantic, yet eerily controlled. Paramedics worked in near silence, the only sounds being the mechanical hiss of oxygen and the crackle of radio updates to the awaiting hospital. As they sped through the Montecito streets, one medic reportedly shook his head and muttered under his breath, "He shouldn't have been left like that. Not for this long." Inside the Sussex estate, however, the atmosphere was different. According to insiders, Meghan stood motionless at the window, watching the ambulance disappear beyond the gates. One house staff member, who has since spoken under condition of anonymity, recalled her demeanor as icy and unreadable. She didn't cry. She didn't pace. Instead, she reportedly returned to her private office and closed the door. It was now 8:40 a.m. in California, but across the Atlantic, the royal family's day was only beginning. The first call went out to Clarence House, where King Charles was already reviewing briefing papers for his public engagement later that morning. His private secretary interrupted the meeting with news so grave that the king reportedly dropped his pen mid-sentence. "Your Majesty, it's Harry. He's in critical condition. They say it's serious." There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. Those present in the room said the king's face drained of color. His jaw tightened, his hand clenched around the armrest of his chair. For a moment, no one moved. Then Charles asked just one question. Where was she? At first, staff thought he meant the paramedics. But when clarification came, that Meghan was in the house, that she had been informed of Harry's state, yet had allegedly not acted swiftly, something in the king appeared to snap. This was preventable, he reportedly said. She let it come to this. She will answer for it. By the time the king arrived at Windsor's recording studio for his charity message, his emotions were barely contained. Midway through a line about resilience and unity, a senior aide approached and discreetly whispered an update. Whatever was said, it sent a visible shiver through the monarch. The cameras were still rolling when his voice cracked. "Cut," he said sharply. But the cameras didn't cut fast enough. Crew members have since leaked descriptions of the moment. Charles removing his glasses, pressing his fingers against his temple, and muttering words that have since become infamous within palace walls. "She's done this. She's killed him. Arrest her." Even as royal advisors scrambled to clarify that the king's words were spoken in grief, not as a legal command, the damage was done. Staff described the scene as one of chaos. Phone calls flew between Windsor and Downing Street. Lawyers were summoned. Senior courtiers debated whether Charles, in his capacity as sovereign, could actually issue such an order. "He wasn't thinking as a king," one palace aide later remarked. "He was thinking as a father whose son had been left to wither in silence, and whose daughter-in-law stood by and let it happen." Meanwhile, at the hospital in Santa Barbara, doctors fought to stabilize Harry's condition. Medical sources, speaking off the record, revealed that his vital signs were precarious upon arrival. Dehydration, elevated heart rate, blood oxygen levels worryingly low. One physician noted that Harry's body was exhibiting signs consistent with extreme stress and exhaustion, what is sometimes referred to as a shutdown response. But how had it come to this? Over the previous weeks, Harry had reportedly displayed clear indicators of a decline, withdrawal from friends, erratic sleep patterns, and an increased reliance on anti-anxiety medication. Staff at the Montecito estate had expressed concerns, only to be rebuffed. "She told us not to overreact," one insider alleged. Said he just needed time to adjust, that he hated being fussed over. But others see something darker in Meghan's alleged pattern of behavior. One former palace aide, who worked closely with the couple before their departure from the UK, described Harry as a man caught in a gilded cage. He wasn't allowed to speak to his family without her knowing. She controlled who he saw, what he ate, even when he slept. "We thought he'd finally found peace in America, but the warning signs were there all along." As this narrative unfolded in the public eye, the British press erupted. Front pages screamed questions. Was Meghan responsible? Could she face charges? Was Harry's collapse the culmination of years of emotional neglect? But back in Windsor, Charles wasn't waiting for headlines. He was already on the phone with the Lord Chancellor, asking what powers, if any, the Crown had to demand an investigation. Lawyers were quick to remind him that Meghan was an American citizen residing on U.S. soil, outside his jurisdiction. But Charles was reportedly unmoved. "She is still part of this family," he said, "and she has endangered it for the last time." The king's fury was matched only by the reaction of other senior royals. Prince William, upon hearing the news, was said to have slammed his fist against the table and stormed out of a private meeting. Princess and reportedly confronted aides, demanding to know why the palace had not acted sooner to intervene in Harry's life. Even Camilla, who has often been portrayed as the peacemaker, was said to have broken down in tears, telling friends, "We've lost him. She's taken him from us completely." As Harry lay unconscious in a sterile hospital room, surrounded by beeping monitors and hushed doctors, the royal family faced a reckoning. This was no longer just about Harry and Meghan's fractured marriage. It was about the survival of the monarchy itself. And so, as Buckingham Palace scrambled to contain the fallout, a question lingered in every corner of the UK and beyond. If Harry doesn't recover, what happens next? And if he does, will he finally tell the world what really happened behind the walls of that Montecito mansion? This is only the beginning. The hours leading up to Prince Harry's collapse remain shrouded in unanswered questions and troubling accounts. To understand the gravity of what unfolded, one must retrace the chain of events and decisions, or indecisions, that may have altered the course of his life forever. At the center of this storm sits Meghan Markle, whose alleged refusal to call for help has ignited fury across the world and deepened fractures within the House of Windsor. It is now widely reported that Harry had been showing signs of severe emotional and physical distress in the days prior. Insiders within the Sussex household have painted a picture of a man weighed down by exhaustion, anxiety, and something darker, an unspoken fear. He had become withdrawn, often locking himself away in his study for hours, emerging only to pace the grounds late at night. Some staff members claimed they heard him muttering under his breath, words they could not fully discern but which carried the unmistakable tone of despair. On the evening before the collapse, Harry and Meghan allegedly had an argument. The exact details remain unclear, but one source close to the household claims it centered on Harry's desire to reconnect with his family in the UK. He had expressed an interest in reaching out to his brother, William, after months of silence. Meghan, the source claims, responded sharply, telling him, "You've already made your choice. You can't go back now." Tensions reportedly simmered late into the night, with Harry eventually retreating alone to his quarters. By morning, it became evident that something was very wrong. Harry failed to appear for breakfast, and attempts to reach him by phone went unanswered. Staff grew concerned and notified Meghan around 7 a.m. Her response, as reported by multiple insiders, was unsettlingly calm. She allegedly brushed aside their worries, saying, "He just needs to rest. Don't disturb him. He hates being hovered over." But what happened next is what has sparked global outrage. At approximately 7:15 a.m., a staff member, concerned for Harry's well-being, approached Meghan again and suggested calling for medical help. According to this staffer's account, Meghan raised her hand dismissively and said, "Not yet. He hates it when people overreact. Let's give him space to calm down." These words, though perhaps well-meaning in her mind, are now being scrutinized as a critical error that could have cost Harry his life. Over the next half hour, Harry's condition reportedly worsened. Another staff member who entered his room after finding the door unlocked described a chilling scene. Harry was lying on the floor, pale and barely breathing. His lips were tinged blue, and his pulse, when checked, was faint. Alarmed, the staff member rushed to Meghan's office and implored her to call 911 immediately. Meghan, they claim, appeared irritated. "You're overstepping," she allegedly said. "He's not dying. He needs peace, not chaos." It wasn't until nearly an hour later, at approximately 8:20 a.m., that Meghan finally instructed someone to call for emergency assistance. By then, precious time had slipped away. Medical experts have since weighed in, stating that in cases of severe stress-induced collapse, every minute counts. Dr. Eleanor Walsh, a neurologist familiar with such episodes, explained, "Delaying treatment can exacerbate neurological damage. If the patient was already struggling with disorientation or respiratory issues, an hour-long delay could make the difference between full recovery and permanent impairment." As paramedics raced against the clock to stabilize Harry, royal aides in London were being briefed on the unfolding crisis. The Queen's former press secretary described the reaction inside Buckingham Palace as a mix of shock and incredulity. News that Meghan may have refused to call for help sent tremors through the monarchy. "This wasn't just an oversight," one royal advisor later commented. "This was willful neglect, or at the very least, catastrophic misjudgment." Public opinion has been equally fierce. Social media platforms exploded with outrage as details emerged. Thousands of posts condemned Meghan's alleged inaction, with some calling for criminal charges. If anyone else had delayed medical help for their spouse in critical condition, they'd be investigated for negligence, one viral tweet read. Why should she be any different? Defenders of Meghan have attempted to quell the storm, arguing that she may not have realized the severity of Harry's condition. One friend of the couple, speaking anonymously to an American magazine, claimed Meghan was exhausted and overwhelmed by her own pressures and did not intend harm. She thought she was helping him by keeping things calm, the friend said. She had no idea how bad it really was. But critics are unconvinced. To them, Meghan's response is part of a broader pattern of control and isolation that has allegedly defined Harry's life since his marriage. Former royal staffers have long whispered about Meghan's influence over Harry's communications, suggesting she actively discouraged contact with his family in Britain. "She micromanaged every aspect of his life," said one former aide. "Even his access to therapy and medical advice went through her. If she decided he didn't need help, then no help would come." These allegations have raised disturbing questions. Was Meghan's delay a tragic misunderstanding, or was it a deliberate act designed to maintain control? Did she fear that medical intervention might expose Harry's condition, and by extension, their carefully curated public image? Meanwhile, King Charles's reaction to the news has been described as one of both grief and fury. Sources close to the monarch say he paced the halls of Windsor Castle for hours after learning of Harry's collapse. When told that Meghan had reportedly hesitated before calling for help, Charles is said to have erupted in anger. "She kept him from us," he allegedly told an aide. "And now she's nearly killed him." As Harry lay in critical care, the king convened an emergency meeting with his closest advisors. The possibility of legal action against Meghan was raised. A move unprecedented in modern royal history. According to insiders, Charles was adamant. "I don't care about precedent," he reportedly said. "I care about my son. She must be held accountable." These developments have ignited fierce debate among legal experts on both sides of the Atlantic. Could Meghan Markle, a U.S. citizen, face criminal charges in America for negligence? Would the royal family pursue civil action instead? And perhaps most explosively, could Meghan's royal titles be stripped as part of the fallout? For now, Meghan remains in Montecito, shielded behind the estate's high walls. But the storm outside is growing louder. Protesters have already gathered near the property's gates, holding signs that read, "Justice for Harry," and "Arrest Meghan now." Back at the hospital, Harry's condition remains closely guarded. Official statements describe him as stable but fragile. Yet questions linger about what long-term damage he may have suffered due to the delay in treatment. And as the world watches, one thing has become clear: this is no longer just a family tragedy. It is a full-blown royal crisis with the potential to reshape the monarchy forever. The atmosphere inside Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital that morning was tense and hushed, as if every breath taken by the medical staff hung in fragile balance with the life of the man lying unconscious before them. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, arrived pale, weak, and barely clinging to consciousness. Paramedics wheeled him through the sliding emergency doors as doctors and nurses, prepped in advance by radio alerts, scrambled into position. What began as a routine response to a stress-related collapse quickly unfolded into something far more serious. The lead physician, an experienced trauma specialist, examined Harry and immediately noted signs of advanced physiological distress. His skin was cold and clammy to the touch, his pupils sluggish, and his breathing shallow and irregular. A nurse recorded his oxygen saturation levels and frowned. "He's dangerously low," she whispered. Blood tests were ordered on the spot, along with a full neurological workup. Time was no longer a luxury, it was a race against irreversible damage. Medical reports later revealed Harry had suffered what is known as an autonomic nervous system crisis, a severe response where the body's natural stress regulators shut down, leading to cardiovascular instability and neurological compromise. This isn't a simple fainting spell. It's the body screaming for help after enduring prolonged mental and emotional strain. Dr. Richard Halloway, a neurologist not involved in Harry's care but familiar with such cases, explained, "When the nervous system collapses under chronic psychological pressure, it can trigger what we call a shutdown cascade. The brain signals begin to misfire, blood pressure drops, and organ systems start to falter. Without prompt intervention, this can lead to hypoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain, and long-term cognitive impairment." According to hospital sources, Harry's condition was stabilized within hours, but not without difficulty. His heart rate was erratic at first, requiring medical staff to administer sedatives and fluids to steady his system. At one point, there were hushed discussions about the possibility of intubation to secure his airway. Fortunately, after nearly 3 hours in the critical care unit, his vitals began to normalize. But the situation could have been very different had he arrived later. One senior nurse reportedly remarked to a colleague, "If they had waited even 30 more minutes to get him here, we might be talking about a brain injury or worse." This revelation only intensified the scrutiny around Meghan's alleged delay in calling for medical help. Medical staff, though sworn to confidentiality, reportedly expressed disbelief in private conversations that anyone witnessing Harry's symptoms would not immediately summon assistance. "You don't gamble with a patient in that state," one hospital insider reportedly said. "Every second counts." Harry's medical history, though largely kept private since his departure from royal duties, reportedly included prior episodes of anxiety-related faintness and panic attacks. But this was different. This was a complete system failure, a collapse so severe that doctors recommended extended monitoring for neurological damage. MRI scans were performed to rule out strokes or other acute brain injuries. While no permanent damage was detected in initial imaging, doctors remained cautious, warning that symptoms such as memory loss, fatigue, or mood swings could emerge in the coming weeks or months. What remains unclear is how much Meghan knew about Harry's deteriorating health in the days leading up to the incident. Sources within Montecito claim Harry had complained of dizziness, confusion, and insomnia for nearly a week prior. He allegedly asked to consult a physician several times but was told by Meghan that he didn't need more scrutiny and should focus on mindfulness exercises instead. "She didn't want word getting out that he was unwell," said one staff member familiar with the situation. "They're very protective of their image as a power couple." Harry's struggles didn't fit that narrative. This raises troubling questions. Was Harry denied proper medical care to protect the Sussex brand? Did Meghan genuinely fail to grasp the seriousness of his condition? Or was there a conscious effort to downplay it? The royal family, now briefed on Harry's medical state, reacted with a mixture of grief and outrage. Prince William reportedly demanded hourly updates from the hospital. "This never would have happened if he was here," he allegedly told aides. Princess, and known for her stoicism, was said to have broken her silence in a family meeting, reportedly exclaiming, "She's bleeding him dry, body and soul." King Charles, meanwhile, remained consumed by anger. After his initial order to have her held accountable, he reportedly instructed palace legal advisors to begin exploring what options, if any, existed under UK and international law to investigate Meghan's alleged negligence. "We may not be able to touch her in America," he told aides, "but the truth will not stay buried." Doctors caring for Harry are now faced with a delicate task, helping a man recover not just from physical collapse, but from the emotional turmoil that may have led him there. Psychiatric consultation has reportedly been advised, and there is growing speculation that Harry may finally be ready to speak openly about the pressures he has faced in his private life. But for now, Harry remains silent. His recovery will be long and uncertain, and the world is left to wonder, what toll has this ordeal taken on the Duke of Sussex's mind and body? And if he emerges from this crisis, will he have the strength to confront the truth about what happened in Montecito and why? The moment King Charles received the news of his youngest son's collapse, the air inside Windsor Castle shifted. Staff members present described a scene that felt less like a royal household and more like the epicenter of a brewing storm. It was mid-morning in London, and Charles had been in the recording studio preparing a pre-taped speech for a veterans' charity. The cameras were rolling, the script laid out before him, but as an aide approached with a pale face and trembling hands, the monarch's focus broke. "Your Majesty," the aide whispered, leaning close to avoid the microphones, "there's been an incident in Montecito. It's Harry. He's in critical condition." At first, Charles didn't speak. Witnesses said he froze, his lips tightening as he stared at the floor. His pen dropped from his fingers, clattering loudly on the table. His voice, when it came, was faint but sharp enough to make even the seasoned cameraman stop breathing. "What happened?" The aide hesitated, as though unsure how much to reveal. "Sir, there are indications." Meghan delayed calling for help. The effect of those words was immediate and devastating. Charles, normally measured even in times of crisis, suddenly slammed his palm onto the table, rattling the glass of water set before him. "She what?" he roared, startling everyone in the room. His face flushed crimson, his eyes narrowed with a mixture of anguish and fury. The cameras were still recording, though the crew had frozen, unsure whether to stop rolling or to stay silent. What they captured in the next few seconds would later be described by insiders as one of the most raw and unguarded moments in Charles's reign. "He's my son," Charles muttered hoarsely, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "She's done this. She's killed him." An advisor tried to intervene, reminding the king that no official report had yet confirmed the details. But Charles was beyond reason. He spun around, pointing toward his chief of staff. "I want her held. Arrest her. Do you hear me? Arrest Meghan Markle." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the ornate chandeliers above them. One staffer, present at the scene, later confessed they had never heard such venom in Charles's voice. "It wasn't the king speaking," the staffer said quietly. "It was a father who felt powerless, betrayed, and utterly destroyed." The recording session was abandoned immediately. Charles was ushered into a private meeting room where senior advisors huddled to assess the situation. Phones rang incessantly as royal lawyers were summoned for urgent consultations. Could the monarch's demand for Meghan's arrest even be entertained? Did the crown have any jurisdiction over a U.S. citizen residing in California? The answer, of course, was complicated. In legal terms, Charles had no authority to issue an arrest order on foreign soil. But his advisors understood that this was not a matter of law, it was a matter of royal fury. "This is unprecedented," one legal aide whispered to another. "He's not thinking like a sovereign. He's thinking like a grieving father, and that's dangerous." Within minutes, the news of Harry's condition and Charles's alleged outburst began to trickle through palace corridors. Princess Anne was one of the first to confront the king. Entering the meeting room, she reportedly slammed her hand on the table. "What have we allowed to happen?" she demanded. "She's been isolating him for years, and we've stood by and watched. And now this." Charles, still visibly shaken, turned to his sister. "I will not stand by anymore. Not this time." Meanwhile, Prince William had been informed of Harry's collapse during a private breakfast at Kensington Palace. On hearing the details, he reportedly pushed back his chair so violently it toppled over, then left the room without explanation. Staffers saw him pacing the grounds of the palace for nearly an hour, refusing to speak to anyone. One aide described his face as the mask of controlled rage. When William finally called his father, the conversation was brief but charged. "If he dies," William allegedly said through gritted teeth, "I will never forgive her. And I will never forgive us for letting it come to this." Back in Montecito, Meghan remained behind the estate's high walls, reportedly unaware of the firestorm her alleged inaction had ignited in London. But across the Atlantic, her name was now being whispered in tones of contempt and suspicion. "She's played the part of the dutiful wife long enough," said one palace source. But behind closed doors, there have been concerns for years. This isn't just about a delayed phone call. This is about control, isolation, and manipulation that may have pushed Harry to the brink. Calls began pouring into Buckingham Palace from government officials, Commonwealth leaders, and even foreign monarchs, all seeking clarity on the situation. Some urged Charles to exercise caution, warning that public outrage could spiral into an international incident. Others, however, privately encouraged his decisive tone. "This isn't just a family matter anymore," said a senior diplomat. "It's a question of moral leadership. If there's even a hint of wrongdoing on Meghan's part, the world will demand accountability." Royal advisors debated how to manage the situation. Should Meghan's royal titles be suspended pending investigation? Could legal action be initiated from the UK? What about the optics of a king seeking to prosecute his own daughter-in-law? By late afternoon, the palace issued a carefully worded statement. "We are aware of reports concerning the health of the Duke of Sussex. The king and royal family are deeply concerned and are receiving regular updates. No further comment will be made at this time." But behind closed doors, the conversations were far from over. Charles reportedly instructed his legal team to prepare a dossier on Meghan's actions. "I don't care what it takes," he told them. "Find out what she's done, and make sure the world knows." For many in the royal household, this moment marked a turning point. The once unthinkable was now being whispered aloud, the possibility of severing Meghan entirely from the monarchy. Not just through legal channels, but through public condemnation. As evening fell over Windsor Castle, Charles stood alone at a window, staring out at the manicured lawns. Aides reported seeing him wipe a tear from his cheek before muttering quietly to himself. She promised to care for him. She vowed to love and protect him. And she failed. It was not the voice of a king. It was the voice of a father whose heartbreak had hardened into resolve. In the months leading up to Prince Harry's dramatic collapse, cracks in his marriage to Meghan Markle had widened into chasms, silent, dangerous fissures that those closest to the couple feared might consume him entirely. Behind the glossy photo shoots and carefully curated social media posts, the reality inside the Montecito mansion was far from the fairy tale the world had once imagined. Insiders now describe a household marked by tension, isolation, and a growing sense of despair that had been gnawing away at Harry's spirit long before that fateful morning. Harry, once celebrated as the rebellious royal who broke the monarchy's stiff conventions, had grown increasingly subdued. Friends back in the UK noted that his once boisterous laugh, the infectious grin that charmed the globe, seemed to have vanished in recent months. He sounded hollow on the phone, one longtime friend confided. "I used to hear his kids playing in the background when we chat. Lately, it was just silence." Or Meghan's voice reminding him he was late for a meeting. Those closest to Harry began noticing subtle changes in his demeanor after his memoir hit shelves. While publicly defending his decision to share his truth, Harry privately confessed to a friend that he felt more vulnerable than ever. "I've opened myself up to attacks I'm not sure I can handle," he allegedly said in one tearful late-night call. Meghan, however, remained adamant that they had made the right move. "This is about owning our narrative," she reportedly told him. "You can't go back to them now, not after what you've said." It was this growing distance between Harry and his family that weighed heavily on him, sources say. In private moments, he often expressed regret over the rift with his brother William and father Charles. One staff member recalled walking past Harry's study late at night and hearing him whisper, almost pleadingly, "I just want to talk to them. I just want them to hear me." But each time he raised the subject with Meghan, the response was allegedly the same. "They've shown you who they are. Stop looking for love where there is none." Meghan's alleged insistence on controlling access to Harry's communications became a point of concern for some household staff. Emails and phone calls from old friends reportedly went unanswered. Video chats with British relatives were quietly cancelled or rescheduled until, eventually, they stopped happening altogether. One former employee claimed Meghan had Harry's personal phone replaced with a new device she monitored closely, under the guise of protecting their privacy. He was cut off from everyone who used to anchor him, the employee said. The only voice he heard every day was hers. At first, we thought it was romantic, her wanting to be a sinner. But after a while, it felt suffocating. This isolation reportedly took its toll on Harry's mental health. Once an advocate for therapy and emotional openness, he allegedly became reluctant to seek professional help. Close friends say he confided that Meghan viewed therapy sessions as a potential leak risk and encouraged him to rely on her instead. She didn't want strangers knowing his weaknesses, said one source. She told him, "We don't need outsiders. We can heal each other." But she wasn't healing him. She was draining him. Harry's physical health began to mirror his emotional state. He lost noticeable weight, his once athletic frame now gaunt and frail. Staff noticed he spent hours alone in his room, often skipping meals. When he did emerge, his face was pale, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. A housekeeper later told an acquaintance, he looked like a ghost in his own home. In the weeks before his collapse, tensions reportedly escalated. One heated argument allegedly erupted when Harry suggested making a surprise trip to London to see his father. Meghan's response, according to insiders, was swift and sharp. "Do you want to crawl back to the people who destroyed us? They'll use your visit to humiliate you." Harry, caught between longing for reconciliation and loyalty to his wife, backed down. But friends say the longing never left his eyes. The most chilling revelation comes from a former Montecito staff member who claimed Harry began keeping a journal during this period. In its pages, he allegedly wrote about feeling trapped, voiceless, and like a shell of the man I used to be. One entry reportedly read, "There's a part of me that wants to run. Just take the kids and go. But where would I run to? She'd never let me leave." This pattern of control and emotional strain set the stage for Harry's physical collapse. Doctors now believe the prolonged stress and isolation were key contributors to his nervous system shutdown. Dr. Marcus Ellison, a behavioral health expert, explained, "Chronic emotional suppression combined with social isolation can create a perfect storm. The body eventually rebels." For the royal family, these revelations were devastating. Prince William, upon hearing of Harry's journal and Meghan's alleged influence over him, reportedly confided to a friend, "We lost him years ago. We just didn't know how far gone he was." Inside the palace, Queen Camilla is said to have broken down in tears after reviewing reports from Harry's medical team. "We were his family," she reportedly said, "and we let her lock him away from us." But it was King Charles whose grief hardened into an icy resolve. Privately, he allegedly vowed to bring every detail of Harry's suffering to light, even if it meant dragging Meghan into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. As Harry lay unconscious in his hospital bed, the world began to piece together the tragic story of a prince whose life had unraveled behind closed doors. Was his collapse a tragic accident, the result of his own vulnerabilities? Or was it the predictable outcome of months, perhaps years, of emotional erosion within a relationship that had become more prison than partnership? That question would fuel an international firestorm. And for King Charles, the answer was already clear. At Windsor Castle, the mood was electric with rage and grief as news of Prince Harry's collapse spread among the senior royals. Behind the polished oak doors of the royal private chambers, voices were raised louder than they had been in decades. For a family known for keeping emotions tightly guarded, the eruption that followed Harry's near-death experience marked an unprecedented break in tradition. Princess and the unflappable stalwart of the monarchy was among the first to confront the brewing storm. The Princess Royal had been in a meeting with her equestrian charity board when an aide rushed in and handed her a note. Her face, usually so controlled, reportedly went pale as she scanned the message. "Harry, unconscious. Meghan, allegedly refusing to call for help. Paramedics arriving too late." It didn't take long before and abandoned the meeting and made her way straight to the king's private study. She barged in without knocking, a senior aide later revealed. Her voice could be heard down the corridor. "Enough is enough," and reportedly shouted as she stood before her brother, King Charles. "How much longer are we going to let that woman destroy him? She's bleeding him dry, and now she's nearly killed him." Charles, seated behind his massive mahogany desk, didn't flinch. His fingers tapped rhythmically against a stack of briefing papers. Though his face was calm, His eyes burned with an intensity his staff had rarely seen. "I've already given the order," he said quietly. "She's to be held accountable." And shoulders stiffened. "You're not going soft on this, are you?" "Soft," Charles snapped. "And she's left my son on death's door. If I had my way, she'd be in cuffs already." While and in Charles exchanged heated words, Prince William was nowhere to be found. He had retreated into one of the secluded drawing rooms at Kensington Palace after receiving the call about his brother. Staffers say he emerged nearly an hour later, his face ashen and his jaw clenched. When approached for comment by a senior aide, William reportedly waved them off, muttering, "Not now. I can't talk about her right now. I'll say something I'll regret." Later that day, William arrived at Windsor for a closed-door meeting with his father and aunt. The moment he stepped into the room, the tension spiked. According to insiders, William's voice was low but seething with anger. "I warned him," he said. "I warned Harry years ago that she'd ruin him. And now look where we are." And nodded in grim agreement. "She's isolated him from us all. He's become a shadow, and we stood back and watched her do it." Charles rubbed his temple, clearly fighting to maintain composure. "I've been patient," he said. "I've tried to let them live their lives. But I won't sit by while my son is destroyed in front of the whole world." It was Camilla, Queen Consort, who tried to interject with caution. Having joined the meeting quietly, she placed a gentle hand on Charles's arm. "Darling," she said softly, "we must be careful. The optics of this. Meghan will paint herself as the victim if we move too forcefully." But Camilla's attempt at moderation was met with sharp resistance from Anne. "Optics," the Princess Royal barked. "A man is lying unconscious in a hospital bed, and you're worried about optics? She's been spinning her victim narrative since day one, and we've played right into her hands." William agreed. "We've allowed her too much power for too long. It's time we take control before she buries him for good." The debate raged for hours, with lawyers and advisors slipping in and out of the room to weigh in on the king's earlier demand for Meghan's arrest. Legal experts warned that as a U.S. citizen living in California, Meghan could not be extradited or detained without cooperation from American authorities. One advisor reportedly told Charles bluntly, "Your Majesty, the Crown has no jurisdiction over her on U.S. soil. This will require delicate handling." Charles's response was cold and unwavering. "If we can't touch her legally," he said, "then we'll destroy her with truth. Let the world see what she's done. Let her titles hang by a thread." William reportedly nodded in agreement. "Strip the titles. Freeze the funding. Make it clear she's not welcome in this family anymore." But Camilla still urged restraint. "Do you really want the headlines tomorrow to read, 'King moves against daughter-in-law while son fights for his life'? The public may not understand our side of this." And, her voice rising again, countered with a ferocity rarely seen even by her closest confidants. "If the public doesn't understand, we'll make them understand. We'll show them the truth about what she's done behind those walls." As night fell, the meeting broke with no clear consensus. But one thing was certain: the mood inside the royal family had shifted from quiet concern to open hostility. For the first time, the possibility of severing Meghan entirely from the monarchy wasn't just being whispered, it was being openly strategized. Outside Windsor's gates, the public was already taking sides. Protesters gathered, some holding signs that read, "Save Harry," "Strip Meghan," and "No more Sussex games." On social media, the hashtags #JusticeForHarry and #ArrestMeghan now continued to trend. Back in California, Meghan reportedly remained behind the high hedges of her Montecito estate, avoiding photographers and issuing no statement. But those close to her suggest she is preparing for a legal counterattack, should the royals make good on their threats. And as Harry remained sedated under the watchful eyes of doctors, the royal family braced for a battle not just for his health, but for the very soul of the monarchy. The media firestorm that followed Prince Harry's collapse was unlike anything the royal family or Meghan Markle had ever faced. Within hours of the story breaking, headlines across the globe screamed with outrage, speculation, and damning allegations. In London, news outlets rolled out breaking updates every 15 minutes. In New York, cable networks devoted entire panels to dissecting what had gone wrong at Montecito. And on social media, the fury was immediate, visceral, and unrelenting. At first, the narrative centered on Harry's health. Prince Harry in critical condition blared across British front pages in bold red lettering. But as more details emerged, focus shifted to the chilling claims that Meghan had allegedly delayed calling for help. "Did Meghan let Harry suffer?" asked one tabloid. "Duchess of Danger?" read another. In the United States, Meghan's supporters initially tried to mount a defense. Well-known talk show hosts suggested that perhaps Meghan hadn't realized how serious Harry's condition was. "We don't know what happened in that house," said one anchor. "It's unfair to assume intent before we have the facts." But these cautious voices were quickly drowned out by an overwhelming wave of public anger. The revelation that paramedics described Harry's condition as hours from irreversible sparked outrage among medical professionals and commentators alike. Doctors took to Twitter and Instagram to explain the seriousness of stress-induced neurological collapse. "Every second counts," wrote one ER physician. "If she delayed treatment, that's more than negligence, it's reckless endangerment." In London, protests began outside Buckingham Palace within 24 hours. Crowds gathered, holding candles for Harry and chanting slogans that ranged from supportive to furious. "Save our prince," read one banner. "Harry deserves better," declared another. But the most viral image of the day came from a small group standing outside the gates of the Sussex estate in Montecito, clutching placards that read, "Arrest Meghan now," and "Justice for Harry." Their photographs were shared millions of times across social media platforms. The hashtag #ArrestMeghanNow trended worldwide for 36 consecutive hours. As the public furor mounted, news channels replayed clips of Meghan's previous interviews. Footage of her describing herself as the most trolled person in the world was juxtaposed against commentary accusing her of being a master manipulator. Memes portraying Meghan as a Black Widow figure began circulating online. Royal biographers joined the fray, with some expressing that they had long feared for Harry's well-being. "This isn't surprising," said one veteran royal correspondent during a primetime interview. "There have been whispers for years that Harry looked increasingly gaunt and withdrawn. This collapse is the inevitable outcome of someone who's been isolated from his roots and cut off from his family support system." Across the Atlantic, the American press tried to navigate the scandal delicately. But even outlets once sympathetic to Meghan began publishing cautious editorials questioning her judgment. If these reports are accurate, one headline read, "Meghan Markle may never recover from this." Meanwhile, social media turned into a battlefield. On Instagram and TikTok, users posted emotional videos pleading for Harry's recovery. Twitter became a war zone, with hashtags like #SaveHarry and #MeghanExposed trending alongside each other. One viral thread recounted every instance where Meghan allegedly interfered with Harry's access to his family or health care. The tweet storm, which amassed over 3 million views in 12 hours, ended with a haunting message. She didn't just isolate him from the royals. She isolated him from help. And now he's paying the price. Inside Montecito, the atmosphere was said to be tense and guarded. Paparazzi camped outside the gates, their lenses trained on the driveway for any glimpse of Meghan or her children. Reports suggested she had summoned her legal team, preparing a statement to counter what her inner circle described as a global smear campaign. "She's furious," said one alleged friend of Meghan's. "She feels the royal family is using Harry's illness as a weapon to destroy her image. Meghan is ready to fight back." But back in London, the royal family remained silent publicly, even as they coordinated a counteroffensive behind the scenes. Palace officials began leaking subtle hints to trusted journalists, painting a narrative of Meghan as controlling and emotionally manipulative. "Senior royals feel betrayed," one insider told a prominent British paper. "They've been patient for years, but this was the final straw." As this narrative took hold, polls in the UK showed an astonishing shift in public opinion. Support for stripping Meghan and Harry of their royal titles surged to nearly 80%. Even among Americans, a majority agreed that Meghan's alleged delay in calling for medical help was deeply troubling. By the second day, international leaders began weighing in. The Canadian Prime Minister declined to comment, but emphasized the importance of mental health support for everyone, especially those in the public eye. Across Europe, prominent figures expressed shock and dismay over the unfolding situation. The Queen consort, Camilla, was reportedly devastated by the media onslaught. Sources say she told a close friend, "This is tearing us apart," but it had to come out eventually. The world needed to see what was happening to Harry. As the world's press continued to swirl around the Sussex saga, one chilling question began dominating headlines. If Prince Harry had died that morning, would Meghan have been held accountable for his death? This question, once unthinkable, was now being debated on talk shows, podcasts, and newsrooms across the globe. And as the palace plotted its next move, the world waited for an official response, not just from Meghan, but from Harry himself. As the media uproar grew louder, legal minds on both sides of the Atlantic began dissecting the possibility of Meghan Markle facing criminal consequences for her alleged role in Prince Harry's medical crisis. What started as speculation quickly evolved into a global debate, with experts weighing in on everything from criminal negligence to potential royal sanctions. In London, the royal household's legal advisors worked around the clock to assess options. King Charles's outburst, his demand to arrest her, had thrown the palace into uncharted waters. Historically, the monarchy avoids entangling itself in legal proceedings, but this situation was different. Charles wasn't merely a sovereign protecting the institution. He was a father convinced his son had been placed in mortal danger by the woman he married. His Majesty is determined to explore every legal avenue, said one palace insider. He believes Meghan's actions, or lack thereof, directly endangered Harry's life. At issue was whether Meghan's alleged delay in seeking medical care could constitute criminal negligence. In California, where the incident occurred, legal analysts pointed to state statutes regarding failure to act. Under California law, a spouse has a duty of care to seek emergency assistance if their partner is in clear distress. Legal expert Professor Laura Steinberg explained. If it's proven that Meghan knowingly delayed calling 911 despite recognizing the severity of Prince Harry's condition, prosecutors could, in theory, consider charges related to criminal negligence or reckless endangerment. However, intent and awareness are key. They would need to prove she understood he was in critical danger. This technical hurdle didn't stop the growing chorus of voices demanding accountability. British tabloids ran scathing editorials questioning why Meghan wasn't already under investigation. One headline screamed, "Why is Meghan Markle untouchable?" While another accused her of enjoying a shield of privilege unavailable to ordinary citizens. On social media, legal petitions began circulating, with thousands signing calls for U.S. authorities to investigate Meghan's actions. Some even demanded Harry's children be temporarily placed under the care of the royal family until his health stabilized, a suggestion that sparked fierce debate. Meanwhile, American attorneys offered mixed opinions on the likelihood of prosecution. Renowned California defense lawyer Alan DeVries cautioned against assuming Meghan would face charges. Unless there's hard evidence, such as messages, emails, or witness testimony, that she deliberately ignored Harry's pleas for help, any case would be circumstantial at best. The optics are terrible, yes, but optics don't make a case. But others disagreed. Former prosecutor Cynthia Morales countered, if staff members or paramedics testify she dismissed urgent requests to call 911, that's more than optics. That's potential negligence leading to severe harm. Even if criminal charges proved unlikely, civil action loomed as a possibility. In a stunning revelation, British royal lawyers began exploring whether the family could sue Meghan in civil court for emotional distress and damages if Harry's condition resulted in permanent impairment. Such a move would be unprecedented. A monarch suing a family member in an American court. But Charles's anger was reportedly so intense he instructed aides to prepare for every scenario. Let her see how it feels to be cornered, he reportedly told his inner circle. But the potential legal ramifications didn't stop there. The palace began discreetly consulting constitutional experts about stripping Meghan of her titles. As the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan retained royal status despite stepping back from official duties. Now, that status was under threat. This is not about punishment, said one constitutional scholar close to the palace. This is about preserving the dignity of the crown. If Meghan's actions endangered a senior royal, the king has both a moral and institutional obligation to act. The mechanics of such a move, however, were complicated. Technically, only Parliament could revoke a royal title, though the monarch could request it. Doing so would ignite a political and public firestorm. Critics warned such a step might backfire, painting Meghan as a victim and fueling her already powerful media narrative. Back in Montecito, Meghan's legal team was reportedly preparing for war. Multiple sources confirmed that high-powered attorneys had been retained to advise her on potential charges, defamation lawsuits, and the possibility of losing her titles. She's not going down without a fight, said one source. If the palace thinks they can railroad her, they're gravely mistaken. One rumored strategy involved Meghan releasing a series of private recordings and messages, allegedly documenting instances where Harry's family had been unsupportive or even hostile toward the couple. If true, such revelations could complicate the royal family's attempts to take the moral high ground. Still, legal advisors to the king remained resolute. "This isn't about gossip or family squabbles anymore," said a senior royal lawyer. "This is about a man's life. And if Meghan failed him in his moment of greatest need, there must be consequences." The question of jurisdiction loomed large. Could a UK-based legal team compel an investigation in California? Would American authorities even entertain a request from a foreign monarch? And what would happen if Meghan refused to cooperate with inquiries? One legal analyst painted a grim picture. If Meghan digs in and refuses to allow her actions to be scrutinized, this could spiral into a diplomatic row between the UK and the US. We're talking about a potential constitutional crisis. Meanwhile, public pressure intensified. Commentators called on President Biden to address the matter, with some suggesting that American authorities should at least review the incident to demonstrate impartiality. The White House declined to comment, but sources hinted officials were monitoring developments. Within Buckingham Palace, Charles reportedly summoned the Privy Council to discuss contingency plans. One idea floated was requesting Meghan's U.S. visa status be reviewed on the grounds of moral conduct, a nuclear option that would almost certainly spark international outrage. But even as lawyers debated strategies, one question remained unanswered. Would Prince Harry himself support or oppose action against his wife? "Harry holds the key," said one royal correspondent. "If he wakes and defends Meghan, all this momentum collapses. But if he confirms the allegations, or worse, remains silent, then Meghan's world will begin to crumble." And so, with Harry still recovering in hospital and Meghan barricaded behind the gates of Montecito, the legal stakes grew higher by the hour. This morning, the world woke to shocking reports out of California. Emergency responders claim Prince Harry collapsed after a severe panic-induced episode, yet Meghan Markle allegedly told staff he just needed space, refusing to call paramedics immediately. By the time help arrived, Harry was barely clinging to life. In London, King Charles received the devastating news mid-recording, and in an explosive moment caught off camera, he reportedly ordered Meghan's arrest. How did it come to this? Was Harry's collapse the result of long-buried family tensions? Did Meghan's hesitation cost him precious time, and is the monarchy now preparing to sever ties once and for all? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking timeline, insider accounts, and the legal and royal consequences that could tear the Sussex story apart forever.